Hello everyone, this is part 3 in a series of videos that I have prepared to help you understand how to use Excel. So in the first part, we had an orientation to the program. In the second part, I showed you how to enter a data table. So that data table is shown here. So if you haven't watched those first 2 videos, you might want to watch those 2 before watching this one. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to write formulas. So what I have here is I have protein mass in each of my samples, and I want to calculate the concentration in micrograms per milliliter. So that means I want to take my protein mass and divide it by the volume. So I'm going to write a formula to do that. So I do that by first typing an equal sign. So an equal sign is a signal to Excel that you are writing a formula. The next thing you could do is you could type in the cell address, but I actually like to highlight it just to make sure I'm not making a mistake. So I want to take the 0, which is cell A6, and divide it by is just a slash. And then I want to divide that by 5. So you notice a few things happen. One is that the Excel displays my formula not just in the cell, but also displays it up here in the formula bar. And it shows me that I'm taking the mass, which is A6, and that's shown in blue, divided by the volume, which is B3 and shown in red. So if I want to enter that formula, I just hit enter on my computer. And of course, 0 divided by 5 is 0. So I want to do the same calculation for the rest of my samples. But what I want to do is I want to continue to return back to this 5. So I want 1 divided by 5, 2 divided by 5, 3 divided by 5, and 4 divided by 5. So the way that I do this is I'm going to come back to the original formula that I wrote. And I'm going to change one of these cell addresses to an absolute reference. And that's going to be B3. So remember, B3 was my solution volume, and I don't want that to change. So again, if I click over here on cell B6, right here, there's my formula. I'm going to edit my formula up here in the formula bar by typing a $sign in front of the B, and then I'll click over here, and a $sign in front of the 3. And then I will hit enter to enter my formula. So this is going to tell Excel, when I copy the formula, go ahead and change this A6. That's a relative address, but don't change B3. That's an absolute address, and I don't want you to change that. So here, there are a number of things to do this, but I'm going to just right click and do copy, and then I'm going to do paste. And let's scroll through this to see what Excel has done. If I scroll through this, you can say A6 divided by B3, A7 divided by B3, A8 divided by B3, A9 divided by B3, A10 divided by B3. So the reason that B3 stays the same is because I put the $signs there to make the absolute reference. But I wanted to use the relative address so that I could calculate the concentration of all of these samples. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to highlight this entire column and set the significant figures properly. This has 3 and those have 3. These need to have 3 too. So if I go to increase decimal, I can have my 3 significant figures. Okay, I need to write another formula, and I want to convert transmittance to absorbance. So the way you convert transmittance to absorbance, there's a formula. It's 2 minus log of the percent t. So let's write that in. I'm going to put equals, and then 2 minus. So now I want to do a log, and I'm just going to type log. And you can see when I start to type log that a number of formulas come up. There are built-in formulas, and Excel will make some suggestions about what it thinks you want to do. So log is what I want. So I'm going to type log, and then now I'm going to type in open parentheses, and I'm going to highlight this cell, so that's C6, and then a closed parentheses, and then I'm going to type enter to accept that. So I get something that's far too long. So let me show you a couple things. One is I'm just going to show you sometimes when you are working with Excel, you might get something that looks like this and you get a lot of number signs. What that means is that your column is too narrow to accommodate the result. So widening the column will fix that. but there are too many significant figures. But let me copy this first, and then we can fix that. So I'm going to copy this formula and then paste it into the rest of the cells. So here I didn't want to use an absolute address. So I have 2 minus log C6, C7, C8, C9, C10. But what I want to do now is I want to set the significant figures. That's way too many. So if I go to decrease decimal, I can make the significant figures look more reasonable. And the other thing I might want to do is I might want to reset the column width. So again, if I click on D and go format, I can do auto fit column width, and that will make the column width the appropriate width. So notice that we wrote a formula over here, and we used the concept of relative and absolute addresses. And then over here, we used built-in formulas that Excel has. And log was what I used, but there are lots and lots and lots of built-in formulas, average, standard deviation, things like that. So before we go on to the next part, maybe at this point you want to print your spreadsheet. So if I go to File, and then print, there are lots of different ways that you can format your spreadsheet before you print it. You'll get a preview of what this looks like. For example, you might want to change it from portrait to landscape. You might want to change the margins, or you might want to scale it in a way that allows you to see a nicely printed version of your table. You'll want to look at this because when you print this, you won't want to have a situation where you're splitting up a table on more than one page if you can avoid it. So I'm not going to print right now, so I'm just going to go back to my spreadsheet. But that's what you would do if you wanted to print at this point. So that is the end of our writing formulas video. In our next video, in part 4, I will teach you how to construct a graph. So see you in part 4.